We agree that access to higher education in Indonesia is important, but we disagree that debt should become the main mechanism to achieve it. Higher education today is increasingly seen as the key towards better jobs, higher income, and social mobility. In Indonesia, many students believe that obtaining a university degree is necessary in order to compete in today's workforce. However, tuition fees remains expensive for many lower and middle income families, while scholarships and financial aid are still heavily implied. Because of this, the proposition side believes that Indonesia should adopt a student loan mechanism, where the government or financial institution pays students tuition fees first, and students repays the government those costs after graduations once they obtain a stable income. Their side believe that this increases educational access, productivity, innovation, and economic growth overall in society. However, on this side of the house, we strongly disagree with the mechanism because the proposition side misunderstands the problem. The issue is not simply whether students can access university upfront, but whether students can sustainably survive the long-term financial consequences afterwards. Their side frames the students' loans as opportunities, but in reality, they normalize debt amongst young people who are already economically vulnerable in the first place. We do agree that educational access should be improved, but we reject the idea that debt should become the main mechanism used to achieve that access. Therefore, this is especially dangerous in Indonesia, where graduate unemployment, unstable wages, and economic inequality still heavily exist in Indonesia and our side of the status quo. Under their world, lower income students are pushed into taking major financial risk without guaranteed economic outcomes after graduation. Therefore, although the current status quo is imperfect, its trade-off remain far less more harmful compared to creating a debt-based educational system that may worsen the long-term financial cost for them in the first place. Before moving to our substantial arguments, let me first rebut the first proposition's argument. Their first argument is that student loans increase access towards higher education because many students cannot afford tuition fees upfront, and scholarships are extremely limited. However, their side assumes that access automatically creates equal opportunity. We disagree because student loans only shift the burden from unable to pay now into forced to pay later after you go through the debt. Poor students are still the ones carrying the higher risk because they are already in a least financial secure and they do not have a safety net after all. The most vulnerable towards unstable job markets after graduation. Their side also assumes that obtaining a university degree automatically guarantees a stable economic mobility. This is unrealistic, ladies and gentlemen, because within Indonesian labor market, where many graduates still struggles with unemployment and low wages. As a result, their side does not eliminate inequality and merely delays financial pressure into their future in the first place, because they can't even afford students in the first place. Their second argument is the student loans improve productivity and strengthen the overall workforce because more people can enter university. However, this oversimplifies structural inequality. The main problem in Indonesia is not only limited university access, but also unequal educational quality, lack of networking opportunities, and limited stable jobs availability after graduation. Even if more students enter university through debt-based system, poor students still compete with an unequal system while carrying additional financial pressure that wealthier students do not experience. Furthermore, once student loans become normalized, government and university become less pressured to directly improve affordability because debt mechanism already exists as solutions. Therefore, their side does not truly solve structural inequality sustainability in the first place. Moving to our first substantial argument, student loans mechanism creates systematic financial insecurity and disproportionately harms lower income students. The proposition side treats education as an investment where future salaries will eventually justify personal debt. However, this logic only works within stable job markets with predictable income growth, which Indonesia does not currently have the consistency. Many graduates still struggle with an unstable unemployment and uncertain career pathway even after obtaining university degrees. This creates a dangerous trade-off because vulnerable students are pressured to gamble their future at a very young age without guaranteed outcome afterwards. Once students graduate with debt obligation, many of their future decisions become controlled by repayments pressure instead of long-term stability. They may delay building families, avoiding lower income careers they actually want, or experience years of financial stress simply because they are trapped by repayment obligations in the first place. The most harmful part is the lower income students become the primary victims of this mechanism because wealthier students can already afford tuition without heavily depending on loans. In comparison, the current status quo may limit access towards university, but at the very least, it does not normalize long-term debt dependency amongst young people. The existence of problem within the status quo does not automatically justify policies that creates even larger harms after their graduation. Moving to our second substantial arguments, student loans commercialize education and allow government to avoid solving the root cause of education inequality directly. Under the proposition world, higher education slowly transforms a public good into a financial transaction where students are experienced to personally carry the cost and risk of obtaining a good education in the first place. Once student loans become normalized, government and university become less pressured to improve the affordability directly because that mechanism already exists as an easy solution. University may continue increasing tuition fees because students can simply borrow more money, while governments reduce urgency towards improving subsidies and scholarship programs. This is especially dangerous in Indonesia, where many families are already financially vulnerable. Debt-based system will also deepen financial anxiety among younger generations. In our world, government remains pressured to improve education affordability directly because education cannot simply be outsourced into that mechanism. This creates a healthier long-term incentives for government to improve scholarship, subsidies, and public university fundings instead of shifting the burden entirely towards the students themselves. In conclusion, although the current status quo remains imperfect, its trade-offs are still far less harmful than creating a debt-based education system that normalizes financial insecurity amongst young people. Student loans do not truly eliminate inequality because they simply shift financial burdens into the future while creating new risk for vulnerable students in the first place. Our side believes education should reduce inequality, not create new forms of economic pressure for students trying to escape poverty in the first place. For all those reasons, this House would not adopt a students' loan mechanism in the first place, and we are proud to oppose the motion. Thank you.